Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are at chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus. We are at the collection of mitzvot, of laws. It is a collection of laws based in the concept of holiness, so much so that this is called the Holiness Code. Chapters 19 through 26 of the book of Leviticus is the Holiness Code. So when we talk about the documentary hypothesis, J, E, P, and D, there is another source, which is H. This is the H source, the Holiness Code. There is an ongoing debate in the biblical scholarship world about whether or not H is a response to the priestly material, or is it written by the priests, but this is a different set of concerns that are addressed to the Israelites. So most of Leviticus is a priestly manual, and it's all about the cult, all about, as we've seen, procedure, how to do it, when to do it, what's the correct way to do it, what's the danger if it's not done correctly. So all of that is super important. The Holiness Code has a completely different set of concerns in that it's not addressed to the priests, it's addressed to the Israelite community. And it's about moral and ethical behavior as well as ritual behaviors like Shabbat. But for the biblical author, Shabbat is also a moral expression, if you will, of being a holy people. And letting those who work for us have the dignity of rest, the equality, as Yehuda Kurtzer so beautifully put it at our Hartman class, that for other people, the dignity of work is the great equalizer, right, is the dignity of work. And for the Jewish people, the great equalizer is the dignity of rest, that even the slave is given Shabbat. Even animals are given Shabbat. So, so H is the source that we're dealing with this morning. Again, addressed to the Israelite people. We're going to look a little bit at the text. But one of the arguments is that in terms of who wrote this material, what prompted this material, is the great discrepancy in wealth that our prophet Amos talks about, and that the H source is pushing back against the cult in a sense of there being an overemphasis on practice that is ritual, and a lack of willingness to address the actual problems that are tearing apart Israelite society. And that the prophets, the early prophets, are pushing back against sacrifice as the way to be a holy people. And so some people say the priests are responding to that pressure by writing the Holiness Code and putting it in the Levitical collection. Other people want to say that it is not a priestly response. It is the prophets and other people pushing on the system. In any case, what we know is that this is a different focus than the rest of Leviticus, whoever wrote it and however it comes to be. And it of course survives the destruction of the temple. So this part of Leviticus stayed a very important part of our understanding of who we are as a holy people. And for the rabbis, continue to really be the backbone of our agreement in living in covenant with the divine to fulfill the obligation to be holy. And the reason given, as we'll see in the Holiness Code, the reason given for that is because Yud He Vav He is holy. So this is imitatio Dei at its finest. This is members of your people. Love your fellow as yourself. I am Yud He Vav He. We're going to come back to this. You shall observe my laws You shall not let your cattle mate with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed. You shall not put on cloth from a mixture of two kinds of material. This is shatnez. If a man has carnal relations with a woman who has a slave and has been designated for another, but has not been redeemed or given her freedom, there shall be an indemnity. They shall not, however, be put to death, since she has not been freed. These, again, are laws that they are shocking to us, but these are actually protection for those who have the status of being slaves. This does not mean property the same way that we had an American experience of slavery. This is indentured servitude a lot of the time, but these are laws that protect, actually, in this case, in particular, female slaves. And so this is how the person atones. The ram of reparation offering to make expiation. When you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden for you not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit shall be set aside for jubilation before God. Only in the 5th year may you use its fruit, that its yield to you may be increased. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not eat anything with its blood. You shall not practice divination or soothsaying. And we go on and on with these kinds of understandings, what it is to be a holy people. Questions, comments, thoughts? Shocking.
No. You started, and this is Kedoshim, and it's all about holiness. Holy in English, to me, just reeks of Christianity. But can you talk a little bit about what this means? What holy means?
Yeah. So
kadosh.
Yeah.
I know it means separate in one sense.
It's a good point that we tend to have in English a Christian understanding from Latin of these words and how they're translated into our vernacular, which is, of course, English. Hebrew does not have the same connotation for kadosh as we think of in English, mostly because there's no separation for Judaism between the physical and the spiritual realm. Everything is potentially holy. Everything is a source of blessing, of holiness and goodness. What determines that is us. So our intention, how we behave according to the holiness code, if we are ethical, moral people, that is an expression of holiness, and we are to be holy because Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is holy. We're not told what that is, holiness. It is clear that our behavior having to do with justice, righteousness, compassion, love, respect, all of these things are tied to the Israelite idea of what it is to be a holy people, to be a nation that is in a covenantal relationship and is obligated to holy behavior. And it permeates every part of Israelite life. So if you pay a day laborer, that is not something separate from holiness. If you hire somebody to work for you, holiness includes how you behave towards that person who's dependent on those wages. If you take someone's cloak in, pledge, right, for a loan, you have to give it back to them at night. So the loan business is not separate from the idea of holiness. How you treat someone who needs a loan from you is indicative of your commitment to being part of a holy people and to living a life of holiness. It's a very hard thing in our culture to find a translation that works. Kuf Daled Shin is really all about, like I said, setting aside, setting apart, meaning in relationship to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. We're supposed to be that among the peoples of the world. We are supposed to be set aside for a relationship with Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, and that relationship comes with terms and requirements. One of the most important is to create a society that is reflective of holiness. Yes, Pam.
One of the hardest things to me to do, first it says, do not take revenge. I get that. But then it says, do not hold a grudge. And for me at least, like if someone harmed, say, a family member, okay, maybe I won't take revenge, but not bearing a grudge would be really hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's one of the hardest things that God is commanding us not to do. Don't hold a grudge.
There's nothing about being a holy people that's easy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to sound flip. I'm serious. Like, the reason these things are here is because it is not our nature, right? It is not easy for us to not hold a grudge. It's really hard. That's why it has to be a commandment. And and same with Shabbat. It's really easy for us to keep working, to get more, to get overtime, so we can have more and buy more. It's not easy for us to say, okay, what I have is enough. It's enough. I'm going to be 24 hours with what is, what I have, what I don't have, and I'm not going to manipulate the world for one day. I'm going to meet it as it is. That's not easy for us. That's why it has to be a commandment. And so, to your point, I think holiness is not natural to us. Holding a grudge is. Right? That's why we have commandments. And the same way you've heard me say before that if Israelites weren't doing it, the prophets wouldn't have to yell and scream about it. So everything the prophets are yelling and screaming about, we can trust the Israelites were doing on a regular basis. Right? You shall not. Y'all are screwing it up. No, whatever they're saying, that's exactly what the people are doing. A lot of them, the majority of them. And I have to believe with this too, the holiness code. The temptation is, right, to not pay somebody on time if you don't have to, right? Okay, thank you. Alex, and then Tamara, and then Judith.
I've thought a lot about the grudge piece, and I think even if it's, of course, they didn't have the kind of tools that we have now, but even if it's like I'm recognizing I'm holding a grudge, and I know, and I'm hoping that within the next few weeks that diminishes, but at least like the recognition, because who is it really serving to hold a grudge? It's just us being tightened about something, or how freeing would it be to not for all involved? I mean, I think it's like everything that we sort of have talked about, that duality, right? I mean, noted that the other person or group might have done something, but how are we to move forward if these grudges are going to, they'll create impasses, they'll create obstacles for us. And I just love that even thousands of years ago, this was recognized. So,
right. And it's recognized as societal, right? I mean, this is not a text for how you can live your best life, right? Letting go of resentment. Yes, that might be a good thing, right? And your life might be better if you let go of resentment and whatever. But this is societal. This is, if y'all hold grudges, you're going to build a society of suspicion, of not helping each other out, right? And I love too that the wisdom of thousands of years is that doesn't build the kind of community we want. It's natural to hold a grudge, which is why we need the commandment, but that's not the kind of civilization we want to build. And for those of us living right now in the midst of the worst grudges I've seen, at least in my 61 years, the kind of vitriol and the kind of environment and the kind of poison it just creates. It's really, you can see it. You can see how toxic it is. And then what Torah understands is then the society doesn't get stuff done to take care of its people. Look at us. We are in such gridlock because of our grudge holding that we can't get the help that the vulnerable in our community need. And this is what the Holiness Code was concerned about in ancient Israel, that the growing wealth divide was making a class of people comfortable and okay, and then a huge underclass of people who were vulnerable and suffered a lot. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I just had someone talk to me about she's going to go to this doctor and this doctor and this doctor and this doctor because her year of she's been out of work for a year and she's no longer part of the guild. And so her insurance is going away and she won't be able to see all these doctors after 2 weeks from now because her insurance goes away. I mean, that's regular folks living with this, that she won't be able to see a doctor, right? So Torah is very concerned about this and says that is not, I mean, it exists, inequity exists, but we are supposed to try to address it and work for a different kind of reality. Right, sorry, Tamara?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If a person lives with these morals and ethics and values compassion and justice and righteousness, etc., and doesn't believe in any kind of higher power, are they considered, or do we consider that person holy? Is that a holy, like, does a person need to be aware of holiness to be holy, or can we be holy just simply by doing all the right things and not like even having faith, not maybe even saying prayers or?
Yeah. So it's a good question. This is one of those questions where we have to ask in which period, where in the world, according to which philosophy and philosopher, right? So I think the simple answer from biblical, practice is it doesn't matter what your intention is. It doesn't matter if you're doing it because you're holy or because it's just the right thing to do and you're going to do the right thing. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Write the check. Mm-hmm. You don't have to want to. You don't have to feel good about it. Write the check. And this is when I speak to non-Jews and, they ask me questions like this. This is normally what I say. However, I want to be clear that there is an ongoing rabbinic debate throughout Jewish history about, is it better to do a mitzvah with your heart in the right place?
Yeah.
Or do you just write the check and it doesn't matter? This is an ongoing conversation among the rabbis, and different periods, different philosophers have different, answers to that question. I think nobody would argue that it's a bad thing to just write the check. And I think nobody would argue that if you do that with a full heart and open hands, it adds to your life and then who you are in the world and all of that. So
let's say you have a full heart and you're doing this because you have a full heart, but there's not a belief in God, or there's even a belief against God, the atheist, the agnostic, is it considered, do we think about that as holy? I'm just curious. Yeah, we still do.
Yes. And that's for us, I think, in some ways the difference.
Yeah.
Right? This is where we're different from other traditions, right? That to be a holy people, you don't have to attach it to Yud He Vav He. The biblical authors do, but you don't have to attach it to God, but you have to behave. Mm-hmm. And if you behave in these ways, that is holy behavior, whether you recognize that or not. Mm-hmm. Right? Torah is calling us to holy behavior, whether you attach it to God and the divine or not. It doesn't matter. You still have to do it.
Okay. And God sees it as holy, or we see it as holy?
It, by definition, is holy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Judith and then Lori.
I think my question is related to the statement that Tamar just made. It's behavior. It's not feelings that are being ordered. So if you hold a grudge but you don't act on it, you don't do anything about it, you just feel it, is that equally unholy?
So, right, these are excellent questions. That we're going to go back to a verse, Ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. How can you command love? Right?
You can't.
Right,
You,
but
you
it does.
can behavior.
But Torah does, right?
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
is an excellent question. Like how? So I don't hold a grudge. Well, how do you prove that that someone is or isn't, and how can you legislate attitude, right? But Torah does. It really does, and like that. I mean, I think there's modern science and wisdom that tells us that there is a relationship between, right, how we think about things, our attitude and behavior. And they influence each other, right, back and forth. Lori?
One thing that struck me is like thinking back to early Torah, like Nitzavim or whatever, that God giving these commandments of how you have to behave is followed by, and if you don't, terrible things are going to happen to you. And you don't see that here at all. Correct. This is that the reason you have to do this is because I'm your God. So I'm trying to think like, what's the threat in there? It's like, then you won't be close to me, essentially. I'm your God. And if you want to be in relationship with me, this is the things you have to do, as opposed to, I'll wreak havoc on your land. So I think that's like a maturing of an understanding of ethical behavior and where it comes from.
Fascinating, because the Deuteronomist is later than Leviticus.
Oh.
So the Deuteronomist, I love that there was an evolution. The evolution is we got kicked out of the land, and God's house was destroyed. Then we come back. And there's an understanding that it all happened because we were not doing these things.
So that there's a concrete punishment, whereas early on you didn't see it as a concrete punishment.
Correct.
And did they really think so? I mean, they really thought that that's how God operated? Well, or is it just a very persuasive story?
If you don't believe that God caused it, then what's the point of God? Right? So if you do believe there's a power in charge of the universe, then that power doesn't ignore this and cause that. It causes everything. So they had to understand, people of faith anyway, had to understand that if there's a God and the God is all powerful and all knowing and all good, then we must have earned this destruction. There's not another way to understand it. Lots of people said, I'm done. Right? Like I'm staying in Babylonia. Forget it. I'm done with this Israelite business because it didn't work. There is no God. And we hear that after the Holocaust. We hear that after, we hear that in today. But people who want to figure out a way to maintain a relationship with something bigger have to then have to either change their conception of divinity. It's not all powerful, or it's not all good, or it's not all knowing. Right? You either have to change your conception of divinity, or you have to accept that we somehow deserved this. Or you wash your hands of the whole business.
Right. So that's where you get Reconstructionism, as opposed to saying we deserved it, and this is God making it happening. You say God isn't the kind of being that makes things happen on earth.
That's right. So Reconstructionism says we don't believe in a supernatural God. We believe in a transnatural God. That's the shift that has to happen if you want to maintain a relationship with some kind of idea of divinity and terrible things happening in the world, including to innocent, good, wonderful people. Yeah. Betsy?
You might have already addressed this because I came in a little bit late, but so does the notion of neighbor include like non-believers, non-Jews, Israelites? I mean, in other words, is it just as holy for us to do things to help non-Jews in need, or is this just confined to, like, is the concept of neighbors just our own people?
So it's a good question, but it's a modern question, right? So think Israelite. If you think Israelite and you're talking re'echa is another Israelite. And we get lots of laws about the ger, the stranger, the foreigner, someone who's settled in your land who's not Israelite. So they are to be protected. We're told 36 times to love the stranger. That means behavior, not feeling, right? So we are to protect those who don't have anyone around. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, because often, what do you want to do to your neighbor?
What do you want to do to your neighbor?
When they throw loud parties and they refuse to take the trash in and they haven't mowed the yard.
You want to take revenge or something. I don't know.
You want to throttle them.
Yeah.
Right. It's the person you live closest to that irritates you the most. Right. The neighbor here whose dogs bark all the time. Like, no one 2 blocks down cares, but we in this house care a lot about how much those dogs bark. Right. So that's why it says your neighbor, because it's really hard to live with neighbors. And it doesn't say your friend, because it's assumed you'll love your friend. But we're commanded to love our neighbor, the one you happen to find yourself seated next to at Shabbat dinner, not your friend. Right. So, but those are the classifications, either Israelite or stranger or sojourner.
And the love you're describing, that's just simply our behavior, and
yes, it's about behavior.
Treat them just like we would treat our own people, our friends and our family. Like,
yes, the way you would naturally treat those people, you've got to treat your neighbor and the stranger.
Okay.
Because that's not our tendency, right? We're all xenophobic, all of us. Right. That we're hardwired that way. It's in our genetic evolution to be suspicious of the people coming over the hill that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Because they carry diseases and things that you don't have immunity to. Right? So it's built into who we are. And Torah's like, okay, so but you can't give into that.
But it seems like in contemporary times, having been exposed as much as we have been to the ultra-Orthodox community, it doesn't seem like they do anything to help anybody outside of their community. So does that mean they're just not following the notion that you have to help your neighbor or love your neighbor? I mean, what's that about?
I don't want to speak for them, but I can only speak from my instinct, having been around that community in my whole life. My instinct is that this is laws for living in the land of Israel. We are not sovereign here in America, right? It's Re'echa is your Israelite neighbor. We're not in Israel. We're in America. And right now our concern needs to be first to help our people, each other, and then to worry if everyone did that, if everyone, worried about their community and took care of their community, there wouldn't be people who don't have enough to eat. It's not that they don't care. It's that their concern is re'echa, your neighbor, means your Israelite neighbor, your people. So it's not that they, again, don't care. It's that the priority should be re'echa, your neighbor.
Well, I don't want to open up a whole can of worms here in terms of what's happening in Israel, but it is interesting to think about in light of that.
Yes, it is ongoing, right? It's ongoing in Israel. It's ongoing in this country. People who are saying, why are we spending money overseas when we have people starving here and kids who can't get an education or daycare here? And yet we're pouring billions into a war with Iran. Why? Right? I mean, it's happening here. It happens in every civilization. Right? What is your priority? And then to what extent? if you say, okay, we're going to take care of our people first. Well, to what extent? Till everybody has what? And that's an ongoing civilizational conversation throughout human history and throughout all human civilization. To what point? Below which point do we allow no one to fall? And I'm horrified by how low that standard is in our country. Horrified by how many children go to sleep hungry in our country, the richest country in the history of the world. We're doing a terrible job. Okay, sorry. Got a little preachy there. Did someone else have a hand up that I did not see? Okay. I noticed in the chat, I didn't follow the whole thing, but I noticed there was a question about what does transnatural mean? So Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, rejected the idea of a supernatural God. The reason that's important is because he was at JTS. He was teaching at the Jewish Theological Seminary his whole career. He was 83 when he left the conservative world and movement over this issue of supernatural versus transnatural. And it's not just words. It's not just a term. This was core belief that made him leave the conservative movement that he served his entire career. He was Orthodox in practice until his death at 103. So he never gave up praxis. What changed for him was theology. So what happened for Mordechai Kaplan is that he could no longer serve a movement and a theology that in any way claimed that the divine is responsible for what happens in the world, that God causes things to happen in the world. God might be the original cause, capital C, that's fine. But that one kid survives leukemia and one kid doesn't is not about God. Kaplan's God does not think or feel or answer. God's role in the universe is being part of everything and being beyond everything. That which is within and beyond the natural world, not supernatural. Supernatural means God acts on the natural world from a place that's super, right? That's outside of that. Transnatural means God is a part of everything and is beyond everything. Now, what does that mean? Good luck. But Kaplan believed that the universe is put together in such a way that its composition is one of divinity filling it, and divinity is defined as the power that makes for transformation, the power that makes for forgiveness, the power that makes for salvation, capital P, capital S, the power that makes for forgiveness, capital P, capital F. This is Kaplan's theology. I am a holy roller Kaplanian in this sense. That prayer is not about me asking God for something and God answers yes or no. Prayer is about me drawing on the power that makes for compassion, that makes for forgiveness, that makes for transformation, pulling that through me so that it changes me. And in changing me, my behavior changes the universe. That's the efficacy of prayer, if you will. That is very different from praying to a supernatural God to cure me or heal me or give me the promotion that I'm looking for, right? That's a very different concept. Right, Bert?
I was going to add that while in 1920 that was really revolutionary, that Kaplan has had a huge impact on theology and thought in other movements beyond Reconstructionism. And that what you just described certainly would be the sense in the Reform movement, and I would think in much of the conservative movement, and thinkers like his name is escaping me, from Valley Beth Shalom.
Schulweis.
That thinkers like Schulweis in the conservative movement have had a big effect. And I think if you would talk to many conservative Jews or many non-Orthodox Jews, they would say the same. And even Yitz Greenberg now has a theory that in the present time, God has kind of left the world to us. So I think he's had a huge impact, not just on the Reconstructionist movement, but on the Jewish world in general.
Yes. Kushner, Schulweis, all of these people were students of Kaplan. Mm-hmm. So he influenced a huge part of the thought leadership and religious leadership of the conservative world, of the conservative movement. They did not leave for their own reasons, that movement. Kaplan did, because even though a lot of those people could harmonize their, conservative theology with, and in this case, I mean Jewish conservative, not conservative, liberal conservative, he couldn't. If you pushed anybody at JTS hard enough to the wall, they had to answer the question, does God care if you eat a cheeseburger? And if you push them hard enough, the people who stayed in that movement said yes. Kaplan couldn't. Kaplan really believed there isn't a God who cares that we eat a cheeseburger. God can't care about those things because God doesn't think. Push Kaplan to the wall and his students, and what he will say is the Israelite search for holiness around consumption and around eating brought them to practice something that keeps them aware that you have killed an animal to eat it and that they have young. Do not kill an animal and cook it in the milk that feeds its young. There's a limit to what you're allowed to do, even if you're allowed to eat meat. There's a limit on how we should behave if we are truly trying to be a holy people. That's Kaplan. That's Reconstructionism. There isn't a God who cares that we eat it. It's us searching for a relationship to holiness in eating. And our understanding of that changes and evolves over time. Not evolves like improves, but it changes. And we should be in every generation asking, all right, well, what is our idea about holiness around consumption? What are those injunctions? What would they be if we were really living in line with being a holy people? What would that look like? And that's the conversation that Kaplan wanted every generation of Jews to be having, and was deeply, deeply depressed and saddened that Jews are not having that conversation. If you read his diaries, he was very depressed and very distressed about the state of the Jewish conversation. And I get it. And I count myself among the disappointers, right? So anyway, that was a long explanation, but Bobby, I'm glad it was helpful. So it's not that you can't harmonize Kaplan with conservative teaching. It's not that. It's that when push comes to shove, he has a transnatural God, not a supernatural God. And if you can't say that, then, you have to say at some point it's from Sinai to be in the conservative theological world. It's from Sinai, and Sinai is top down. And Kaplan believed it was all bottom up. It was all created and written by Israelites, later Jews, in their quest for relationship with the divine, and in their quest to be a holy people. Yes, Rachel.
That was beautiful. I really enjoyed what everyone talked about today, and I love the way you just described Kaplan. Go and read everything that he ever wrote, but it also was a beautiful justification, if one needed one, to the statement that unfortunately I do hear sometimes, which is, oh, I hate Leviticus. It's so irrelevant. What's the point? Which, I mean, you do hear from people. They're like, they kind of say, oh, it's all these, silly rules and sacrifice, and it's so irrelevant today, and da, 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 and it just, all I could think when you were saying that was, no, it's so much about the early Israelite exploration of how do we live in relationship to this, to what is holy? How do we be a people set apart from the Canaanites around us? And in that sense, it's a beautiful exploration of those first steps in a way. So thank you. You just made it. I liked Leviticus anyway, but because I'm a weirdo, but now I like it even more. So
welcome to the nerd club.
So there,
right? We're there. And Tamara, you're right. That's why we read it on Yom Kippur. That's why, right? That's because we're supposed to be reminding ourselves what a civilization based in holiness would look like. We're supposed to be concerned about that on Yom Kippur, right? And discussing the ways that we have failed to do that. So yes, it's a very purposeful assignation of this text to the most important day of reflection of the year, not just individually, but communally, right? How we're doing. All right, I want to show you one more thing, and then I'll let you all go. I want to show you this beautiful teaching that I found on this text, on this pasuk, on this sentence from the early Hasidic master, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Leiner of Ishbitz. He's known as the Ishbitzer Rebbe. He said this commentary is by Lisa Goldstein, and it's based in trauma, how we deal with healing from trauma. And the Ishbitzer is commenting on this verse, loving your neighbor as yourself. All right, so let's hear what the Ishbitzer says. I love this. And this is how you're supposed to fulfill the commandment of, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. How are you supposed to love your neighbor as you love yourself? How do you love yourself? Like, what does that mean? As you love yourself? The Ishbitzer says a person knows their own faults and their shortcomings. Nevertheless, they love themselves. So too must you love your neighbor, even though you recognize them as imperfect. This is the meaning of I am Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, right? Because remember, that's what comes at the end of the verse, love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. Just as the blessed name, meaning Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, loves both of you, despite knowing your deficiencies, as stated in the Talmud, either way, you are still called children, meaning children of the divine. Rabbi Lisa Goldstein says the Ishbitzer is making 2 points. The first is that we don't have to be perfect in order to be loved. The Ishbitzer assumes that we know this from our personal experience. We love ourselves even though we are aware of our flaws. However, many people who know themselves to be perfectionists may actually believe deep inside that the only way they can be seen as lovable is to be perfect. This is where the Ishbitzer's second point can be helpful. He explains that it is not an accident that the commandment to love our neighbor is followed by the assertion, I am Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. God loves us all. And he brings proof from the Talmud in which the rabbis are debating whether we can still be called children of God if we are sinful. The final answer is, in Talmud, yes, of course. Our human parents may have more or less capacity to love us, but God loves us unconditionally despite our imperfections. And therefore, God provides the model for how we should behave, When we interact with our imperfect neighbors in our day-to-day lives, we should try to channel that kind of holy, unconditional love. A beautiful, beautiful interpretation by the Ishbitzer, that those are not accidents, that they're put together, that just as you love yourself, meaning you know your flaws and love yourself anyway, but there are times where we don't love ourselves because we don't see past our own flaws. Both, we need both. To love our neighbors as we love ourselves, even knowing our own flaws, we love ourselves. So can't we do that with other people? And the times we can't love ourselves because we don't feel like we're good enough, we're called to remember Yud He Vav He. I am Yud He Vav He. I love you and your neighbor who's pissing you off with their barking dogs. And so you got to figure that out.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehilat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.